Hey, Barbie.
Hey.
Hey, Barbie.
Oh my God, can you believe this? Oh, turn your phones off, people. All right, so we are here for another edition of Wake Up Pull Live, and I have been so excited and waiting for this day because it was no small feat just to get you fabulous ladies together at a convenient date and time for everybody to talk about the Barbie movie. So thank you. And I'm going to introduce you all very briefly, just so we all know who we're talking to. We have Barbie Amy Kors. She is an attorney in New Jersey, and she is practicing music and entertainment law. We have Barbie Deb Harrison, a growth and change coach and consultant. She also works with individuals and corporations, so I want you all to know that. And we have Stacy Feintuch. She is a writer slash blogger, and I think you all should know that she used to work for Mattel. Quite some time ago, she worked there for 10 years from 89 to 99, and I cannot wait to hear more about that. So thank you, ladies, for joining me. Real quick though, like what is the general consensus on the Barbie movie? Like thumbs up or thumbs down?
Thumbs up.
Oh, good. Okay, good. So that's cool. We'll all agree. You know, sometimes it's good to get someone who disagrees, but I'm sure that you all had your own impressions, maybe your favorite scene or things that touched a nerve in you. So I want to hear about that. I want to hear just generally, like, was there one scene in particular or one theme that had like a really huge impact on you that you walked away with and couldn't stop thinking about?
I think for me, it was when Rhea Perlman, Ruth Handler, who created Barbie, and she was explaining to Barbie how and why she created her after her daughter, whose name was Barbara, and why she created her, that children used to play with baby dolls. And then she saw her daughter play with paper dolls, and she created a life, like a real looking girl for her daughter to play with. And I don't think she realized what she was creating at the time. And it turned into a multi-billion-dollar company.
Sure did. I like that. I thought it was a nice touch that they had Rhea Perlman in there, her role.
Yeah.
I thought that was a really nice touch.
I did also.
What about you guys?
Well, in that conversation too, where she made the statement about mothers standing still so the daughters can look back and see how far they've come, right? Like that's one of those that'll go down in history, whether you liked or hated the movie. That's just a profound statement. I think you can apply it beyond that, right? Whether you're a coach or you're a leader or a father, right? That idea of how we place ourselves in a position to let people look back and use us kind of as their due north. So that was definitely one of the highlights for me as well, that scene.
Yeah, so it's interesting because for me, the theme throughout the film, and I think it can be extrapolated into a broader theme, but the micro theme for me was the mothers and the daughters.
Right.
And it's because, and Christina knows this, but like everything I view through this worldview of my relationship with my daughter. And so I loved to watch the evolution of, the relationship and how Bart, like the idea of how they had connected over the Barbie dolls when she was younger, and then how they separated, as the daughter grew older, and then how they reconnected, not necessarily just around the doll itself, but about being a woman. And so that evolution of the relationship and the evolution of this young girl from being a young girl and what she needed as a young girl relative to her mother to what she then needed later on in life, and how they were able to find ways to reconnect, that moved me a lot in watching the movie, which was somewhat less about the overarching theme of feminism, but I actually felt that was a much more important takeaway from the movie as a whole. And it's something that I feel like it doesn't get enough chatter in a lot of the discussions about the film, but it's interesting because it's really the same thing that you guys are talking about, just kind of a variation on a theme.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. When I've had so much to think about with the movie. There were so many things that moved me. But I would say you pointing out the mom-daughter thing, I may have overlooked that a little bit, but I think you're absolutely right about that. It was interesting to see the way that I think her name was America Ferrera, her experience with Barbie and the way that she looked back and nostalgically with playing with Barbie when she was a kid, which I can relate to because I had the same experience. And then the way her own daughter viewed Barbie, you know, not in the same nostalgic, you know, whimsical kind of way, like almost like Barbie is, you know, Barbie's just a victim. She's the patriarchy and, you know, down with Barbie. But I think that's true of maybe the younger generations today is I think they have a very different attitude about Barbie. And I know Amy, I know Stacy, you have daughters. I don't know about you, Deb. I don't have daughters. I have a goddaughter, Sydney, who's 10. What have you observed there with your girls and Barbie?
Well, my girls they did love Barbie. They grew up with Barbie because of me, because I had such a connection with Barbie because I worked at Mattel, and I have a collection of Barbie dolls I have a closet full of Barbie dolls. They're collector's items. And when they were little girls, they were fascinated by them, and they wanted to play with them, and they wanted to get their hands on them. Worth anything if you take them out of the box. So it was always like a push and pull with me of, can you touch the Barbies? Can you not touch the Barbies? So I have a very different relationship with my daughter and Barbie than most people. And they still talk to me about that. And they still think it's like really funny that I have these Barbie dolls. But in general, you know, I think it's the same for most kids. They played with them when they were little. And then as they showed in the movie, they became the weird Barbie. They cut their hair off. They drew all over them, and they threw them in a corner. And like, that's the Kate McKinnon Barbie. Because everybody has one, at least one of those.
At
Do you
least
think that they were a bad influence on girls? Go ahead, Amy. I didn't mean to cut you off.
I mean, I think that a lot of the Barbie dolls become the weird Kate McKinnon Barbie because, you know, you have that evolution over time. But I mean, it's Barbie, but I think it's like all toys. I think all kids have a tendency. I always think of the kid in Toy Story, you know, that like took all the toys apart and then created all of these like weird creatures. It's really, again, it's that same idea. Like part of the Kate McKinnon character is just an expression of like, what can I do with this? Like, how can I make this different? What can I try? How can I experiment with what I have in front of me? And, you know, it's just a different expression of play, which, you know, is one thing on a $10 Barbie. It's something completely different on a collector's item Barbie that you don't want that to happen. So
yeah. Well, interestingly, we have a new guest that joined us a little late. We've had her on the show before. She's somewhat of a Femme Squire VIP or Femme Doctor. You're a doctor. She's a plastic surgeon in North Carolina. I love talking to plastic surgeons. So, welcome, Dr. Roeder. And I think it's interesting, you know, your life experience working in plastic surgery. And I always forget that a lot of what you do is reconstructive. So it's not just people that, you know, want to get boob jobs or nose jobs or whatever, you know, whatever anybody's feeling is about those kinds of things. But it's interesting to me how Barbie can relate to the world we live in where people are getting plastic surgery like these days to look like a Kardashian, to have a big giant butt or have big boobs. And the criticism that we've had over the years of the figure of Barbie, where if you had made this person into a real person, like they couldn't possibly have those kinds of measurements. But I actually wonder if Barbie's measurements in the real world, if it's closer to what we're seeing people do now with plastic surgery. I don't know if anybody knows the answer to that, but I'm kind of curious. I'm gonna have to Google that later. Because it used to be something crazy. Like, does anybody know what the measurements were that you had to have?
I vaguely remember hearing years ago that it couldn't be a real person, like that, like she would topple over or something, like those measurements couldn't work on a real person. But I'm not sure.
Yeah. Interesting though, because today I think we're seeing I'm calling it the Kardashian influence, but I don't know that Kim was the one who made it up, but she has really extreme proportions. And I think most people don't look like that naturally. I don't think Kim looks like that naturally.
Well, no, I mean,
I don't know for a fact, but might be suspicious that she's had something done there.
Okay, I've consulted the Google God, and according to Google, Barbie would be 5'9" tall, have a 39-inch bust, an 18-inch waist, 33-inch hips. She would weigh 110 pounds and have a BMI of 16.24. The doctor could tell us what that really means. She would have difficulty walking and having her period due to her measurements. The original Barbie was 11.5 inches tall with a 9.5-inch bust and a 5 3/4 inch waist. So there you have it.
I don't think that exists in nature. Do you, Dr. Roeder?
I mean, not in nature, but we can definitely fabricate some of those. BMI below 17 is considered underweight, right? So obviously Barbie's super skinny. I think the difference is in the 70s and 80s, that twig kind of look was what was in, and then you artificially enhance your breasts, like growing up Skipper. Do you guys know about growing up Skipper?
Was that the one whose boobs would inflate?
Yeah, how weird. I might be that for Halloween because it sounds fun. But people resect ribs sometimes, like in the extreme, to try to get very narrow waists that are completely disproportionate. Wow. There's that whole corset training that I think gets promoted as well, which is not super realistic. But these days people are looking more for volume. They're looking for a butt, right? That's why those surgeries are so popular, more so than anything. And these days, breast augmentations have gone down. It used to be the #1 procedure in the United States, and that's no longer the case. It's the 4th last year. So people are not really into breast implants as much. And I've seen that in my practice as well.
What are the other 3?
So liposuction has gone up, and facelifts. And I think this is definitely a product of COVID. My first few years in practice, I really didn't do many facelifts. And now I do facelifts all the time. Like every Friday, it seems like I'm doing a facelift or a blepharoplasty. I think because people look at themselves on Zoom a lot. And that really, with COVID, that started. Like everybody comes in complaining about their necks and about their face and their eyes. And it's totally a product of us being online like this. So facelifts that shut up quite significantly as well.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. But, I think Barbie gets blamed a lot for being the problem, but I don't really see Barbie as the problem. I see Barbie more as a symptom, more as a result of perhaps the way that we look at women, the way we expect women to be, the unrealistic expectations that we put on women. What do you guys think about that? Any opinions?
Yeah, absolutely. And because there've been so many things that you've been saying where I've been like, this, the same thought has been pulling in. So now it's kind of a good time to say it. I think when you think about the expectations, and you mentioned America before in that speech, that the other speech that she made that was really powerful in the movie, right, where she talks about never being enough. And I think about a conversation that I was having recently where we were talking about our backgrounds, and a couple people had come from fairly troubled backgrounds and somebody else had not, and was like, oh, I feel like I don't belong because I had like a pretty normal background. And I thought like that really lines up with the theme of the movie, right? We're not even just broken when we're broken. We're broken when we're not broken, right? There's always this kind of need to be something more. And I think that desire and that cultural shift and expectation that we're going to be the best at everything, the best at being wrong, the best at being right, is such a pull, right? And it's just constant. And so, you could see that tension and how that evolved.
Yeah, I thought the monologue was brilliant. It was very moving. It was like you could hear a pin drop I saw the movie twice. One time you could hear a pin drop. Another time everybody broke out into applause.
Wow.
I thought that monologue was very powerful.
Yes, it definitely was.
Did you think that it was accurate? I mean, was there any aspect of it that you thought might have been an exaggeration? You have to play devil's advocate. No.
I
Sounds
don't,
like it's unanimous.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
remember it exactly, but no, I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we live in this. So, maybe in the 80s, I'm not trying to forget the time period here, but like in the 80s where it was almost like you were looked down upon if you didn't stay at home as a mom. Then you were looked down upon if you did stay at home as a mom, right? And so it was starting to become this pivot point where people were talking about the idea that like neither is right or wrong, that you can be either. And I think that's what she was trying to get at, but that we tend to kind of make things into this dichotomy of you're going to be this or you're going to be this. And even with Barbie herself, right? I think like some girls probably say they hate Barbie because they feel like they have to say they hate Barbie. When to your point, it's not the doll's fault, right? It's okay to want to play with a doll. That doesn't mean that you're saying that you're going to support the system of oppression. But so there's just this constant struggle of where do you pick? What is the correct path? And how is that going to be perceived? So, I mean, everybody else agreed, right? I think it really felt right on.
Well, and I'll just chime in to say, like, my mom became a flight attendant in the late 60s, right? So it's not, it wasn't a typical career path at that point. And there were certainly a lot of pejorative terms thrown around for women who chose to take that path in life. But from her perspective, she did it, whatever, that was her career path. But she never wanted to do that. Like she's not someone who would have ever said, oh, I was being some great feminist or breaking barriers or doing something for women or lighting the world on fire. All she ever wanted to do was be a stay-at-home mom. And when you hear a monologue like that, you sort of say to yourself, like, okay, so here's somebody that I looked up to growing up, thinking in my mind, oh, wow, look, she went and did something that was so atypical for a woman in her early 20s to go out, couldn't have a bank account of her own, couldn't have her own bank account, had to have a family member, my grandfather, with her to get a bank account. But she was out there flying around the country as a stewardess, right? We don't call them that anymore, right? But that's what she was. And she was able to really break down a lot of barriers for women that she didn't even see herself doing. And I know from living with her and from talking to her about it, it's not what she wanted to do. That wasn't ever her goal. And it certainly wasn't ever her goal for me, right? Like she would have been happy for me to be a stay-at-home mom. That's what she wanted me to do. Grow up, marry a nice Jewish lawyer or doctor, right? So I think that the reason why the monologue rings so true for so many, regardless of where you're situated, what your career path is, what your race is, what your socioeconomic status is, what your religion is because we are all able to find a piece of that rings true for us. And it was something that really sort of bridged a barrier, I think. And at least for me, it made me remember, like, okay, yeah, that's when we're talking about feminism, that's really what we're talking about, is that one little strain of commonality that should bring us all together rather than dividing us, to say, like, these are the things that, and it's not like feminism could be being like, why can't we advocate for people to be stay-at-home moms? Why can't we advocate for women to be president at the same time that we're advocating for women to be stay-at-home moms? And, why can't we advocate for Black women to have this and Hispanic women to have that, and all at the same time, right? Like we can do that all at once. And that's, I think, the core of that monologue was really getting at that whole idea. And that's why I think so many of us like sat there listening to it, and we were like either shell-shocked in a sense, or we applauded it because it was like, oh yeah, okay.
I also think that Barbie is a perfect example of what you're saying, because Barbie started as a teen model, and then that was looked down upon. So then she became an astronaut, but then that was silly. So then she became a doctor, and there was a problem with that. Then she became like, she never became a mom, but one of her friends became a mom, and then somebody had a problem with that. It's anything Barbie did, there was a problem with. It was never right. It was never good enough. She was too feminist. She wasn't feminist enough. It's always an issue. There's always a problem. That's why some people just don't like Barbie, because, well, why is she doing this? Why did they make her do that? It's the same thing in a doll.
But isn't that I think that's what you're saying. That's what they do to us. we're the doll. We're the doll is us.
She's an example of what people do to women.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
And that they try and find ways to divide us and make us see the things that are different, as opposed to trying to see the things that are the same, you know? And that's always a problem with, you know, the feminist movement, is that we always end up sort of fighting against ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really a shame, because the whole core idea is to just try to lift all of us up, regardless of where our starting point is. And I think Barbie, in some respects, is really just the straw man, right? All my screens went down on me because I didn't touch anything. Sorry. I like NASA here. So, you know, I just think that's like, to me, when I'm looking at the movie, that's really what I'm seeing about it, is that, you know, and really just Barbie in general, like, yeah, we can say, okay, fine, somebody made a mold of her, right? I think that's sort of your original question that got us off onto this. Like, somebody made a mold, and I always think of the original Barbie as like, somebody looked at Marilyn Monroe and said, yeah, let's make a doll that's like hippie and busty like her, right? Because men loved Marilyn Monroe. And, you know, and we got Barbie, and she's very hippie and busty. And then once they made the mold, that was it. I mean, they're not going to recast a new mold because it's expensive. And they've already got like millions of them out there in the marketplace, and this is what they look like. And then we're going to change it, and then everybody's going to be like, who the hell is this? I know they changed it at one point, but in the 90s, right?
S&P, and she weighed more, or she had, her boobs were small, whatever. They changed her around, and people had a problem with that too. So you can't win.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I loved Barbie when I was a kid. I loved to play with her clothes and her little tiny shoes, and dress her up in cool outfits and do her hair. I loved how all her clothes were sparkly. Like, I don't think that, you know, I see my goddaughter Sydney playing like that too. She's 10 now, but so maybe when she was a little bit younger, but she loved all that stuff. She loved playing with dolls. She liked all the glitter and sparkly things. I don't know if there's just something that they see something sparkly and it sets off something in their brain. I don't know. But when I was a kid playing with Barbie, I mean, I certainly wasn't thinking about the patriarchy, or that, you know, the man was trying to keep me down. I just saw a doll that was fun to play with. And, you know, we all know that kids mimic everything that they see the other humans around them do. And I feel like that was just another version of that, you know? Like, I see Sydney sees me as a female role model in her life, and she wants to copy things that I do. So I'm sure I did the same thing when I was a kid, and playing with Barbie was just another way to do that, you know, to kind of dress up like I would see the other grownups around me doing, or, you know, whatever, maybe Wonder Woman, whoever the heck was on television at the time. So I don't necessarily believe, and I know I might get killed for this by you ladies or other people watching this, I don't necessarily think that Barbie was this terrible influence on young girls growing up.
I don't think so at all. Actually, my older daughter, used to play with Barbie, same like you. She liked the shoes, she liked the clothes, she changed their outfits all the time. And it was honestly her first introduction into fashion. She ended up going to fashion school, and that's what she does for a living now. So to my daughter, she was a great influence.
I mean, it's imaginative play, right? So I'm from Brazil originally, for you guys that don't know. And when I was 9, I moved to the United States, and this was in 1987. And my dad was a very generous man that gave us $5 a week for allowance, right? So I saved all my money. And after a year and a half, when I left the United States, I had 21 Barbie dolls. Well, I would say probably 18 because 3 of them were Ken. It was like polygamy the right way. Um, so, and you can imagine all the other things we had. We had like the pink Corvette, we had a house, we had all sorts of things between me and my sister. My sister had her other set. Unfortunately, I think I told my mom she could get rid of my Barbies a couple of years ago, and now they probably would be worth a lot of money. But we would have when we came back to Brazil with my cousins, we had this room we'd set up, and the boys would have GI Joes, and we would have so much play in that room. We would create universes and stories, and it was all about imagination and driving things forward. And we had Barbies of all types. They all have all sorts of different careers, and it didn't matter which box they came from. But the Barbie that I loved the most that I had to have was Whitney, because she had brown hair like me, right? So a lot of the way Barbie has evolved is not is about representation. Like, it makes a difference for you to find a doll that looks like you. And we did sort of Miss America pageants. We would make our own clothes, just like I guess your daughter got into fashion. And we would have all sorts of pageants and create all sorts of universes for them. So there's more to it than that. But I think we do look for that. When the African American Barbie came out, right? Asian and all of that, I can only imagine like how much girls could identify with that. Because at first, I was like, yeah, I had all these blonde Barbies. As soon as I saw the brunette one, I'm like, oh my God, like that is what I need to have. There is something about finding a little piece of yourself in any toy that you play with and taking it to a different universe, right? But I never wanted to be like Barbie. I just wanted to find a Barbie that looked like me. You see, like it's a little different. And it's not like anybody else. Like, I didn't have insecurity issues and body image issues, but they didn't stem from the doll. They stemmed mostly from the things I heard from people around me,
Yeah.
what the standards were in that particular culture all the time, and how I heard other women talking about themselves and their bodies and what they were seeking.
Totally agree with that. If anybody grew up having a certain idea about what a woman is supposed to be, it didn't come from Barbie. It came from whatever people at home were telling you, whatever you were seeing in the world around you. That's why I think it's so important to have women from all different cultures on television, newscasters and different professions, because I've heard it a million times that somebody Black or somebody Asian or somebody disabled will say, well, I finally thought that I could do that too, because I saw someone who looks like me do it.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that is the most important thing for any girl to see, is to see the other women around her, or visible to her at least, doing those things that she may want to do. Because you might not even think about it. You might not think, oh, I could be president, because you only see men do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the only way that we really have that is, to your point, where we see them in toys, in cinema, on TV, because the reality is that you just don't see them in day-to-day life. Your exposure in the world as a child is very limited. You go to school, you go to your activities, you see your parents, right? So like, you have Sydney sees you, she has this amazing role model of this strong woman who's out there putting herself out in the world, doing all these amazing things, right? Awesome. My son sees me, right? So, I drive a pink car, okay? So, like, my son has basically grown up believing that it is perfectly normal to have a pink car, or have his mom have pink hair, right? Like, or have his mom work all the time, right? My daughter as well, she's 20. I've worked her whole life. So, when you don't have exposure to that, and I mean, Barbie does a great job of this with having a lot of diversity. It's developed over the years, but I can think of other, like American Girl also, has a lot of diversity and a lot of, what you were talking about, where you can go in and get a doll that looks just like you. And that's great for kids. And then you can dress them up and they can be different professions and they can engage in different activities. They have like a little wheelchair for the doll. You could take the doll to the salon and go out to eat with them. Did you go to American Girl with us, Christine?
I have never been to American Girl.
I don't know if any of you guys have been. It's like
I've been.
it's a place where a girl can take her doll for the day for the doll to get clothes and a meal. Okay. That's the best way to describe it. But that, I think, you know, I guess growing up to, I'm 48, right? So the first movie I ever saw in the theaters was Star Wars, right? So I saw Princess Leia, right? And look at that character of Princess Leia being this strong woman, you know, leading the resistance, rebelling against, you know, this dark, evil character, you know, and engaged in fighting and shooting weapons. And like, who the hell would have even thought, you know, women did stuff like that, right? Or Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman was huge in the 70s and 80s. Like, that was by having women like that to show us that women could do things. You know, that I think is what opens our minds to believe, and that's where we can engage in that level of where we take imaginative play and make it real play.
Well, some people, I feel like it, maybe some women, like younger women today, and I was guilty of this a little bit when I was in college, which was a long time ago now. But we do tend to look back, like kind of like what I think, Stacy, you brought it up, is, or Deb, maybe you did it, when America was looking back and saying that you can sort of measure the progress when looking back at your mom, or was it Rhea Perlman?
It was Rhea Perlman, yeah.
She said that, you know, we kind of stand back so that you can see how far you've gone. I mean, it's not just moms doing that. You know, when I heard that quote, I sort of thought about RBG. And people like Laura Steinem was in the movie. And I think it's also easy for us to look back at what those women did and the trailblazers that they were and are, and kind of think that we're done, that there isn't more work to be done. And I think that a lot of young women today can fall into that trap, as I did once, where, oh, we don't need that anymore. Like we're at the table, you know, we can be CEOs, we can do this and that. And yeah, we can, but I don't still see a lot of it happening. There's still a lot of work to be done. So I do think sometimes we sort of get poo-pooed, like by the younger generation, like it's not, oh yeah, that's really great, but we don't need that stuff anymore. Like we're equal now. So I want to know what you guys think about that.
I think that happens a lot, and they do think that. And then when they go out in the environment and they suffer the microaggressions, right, and the subtle, because now they're not macro. It's not like you can't be here. Like you can be here, but you know, thanks for telling me that, right? But nothing really kind of flows from it. And then I think that that's where the depression and ensues, and the disappointment. That they were told that they were equal, but then once they enter the workforce, they realize that they're really not. I mean, do I have a seat at the table? Yeah, I'm a partner in my company, right? But for me to get something done, sometimes it takes one of my male partners repeating the same exact damn words. And then everybody seems to like find it really clear, really understand the point, you know? And I'm like, really? Like they repeated what I just said. And it really, and it's really always an uphill battle. Like you have to think about how you're going to say something, when you're going to say something, and what kind of emotion or lack thereof you have to express it with in order to be taken seriously. As opposed to the guys that can yell, be derogatory, not really even measure their words, right? And get something accomplished. So I feel like, yes, I had that mentality too, where I'm like, well, I'm just going to be exactly like all of them. I'm just going to keep doing things, right? And then as you mature and you really enter that space, you realize it maybe isn't quite as much as you were sold that you were equal. And people are so tired of this narrative of women saying like, you know, We want to be equal. We need equity. They're all the buzzwords, right? And you can hear so many people rolling their eyes. And we're a victim of it ourselves, where we say, well, I made it this far. Because I remember a lot of women surgeons who really had to fight through the system. And they're looking down, being like, you had it easy. You can't imagine what it's like when I was in there. And I said, oh, I respect it. It was extremely hard when you were in that position. But just because you had to suffer that doesn't mean I have to suck it up, right? It's about empowering the next generation to do even better than what we're doing. And understanding that, yes, like I broke some barriers, but I haven't broken all of them yet.
Yeah, totally agree with that 100%. And, you know, I see Amy laughing, so I got to let you speak, but I have a feeling that Amy will agree with this, and you guys let me know if you have this in your experience. But being a business owner, being a boss, you know, having direct reports, I have always found that my male counterpart, my business partner, I just feel like he's not treated quite the same way by employees as I am. He can say something, and if he says it, he could say it exactly the same way, and he's just being a boss. But if I say it in exactly the same way, I'm being a bitch. Or I can send an email and just, you know, tell so-and-so that I need you to do X, Y, and Z. And somehow I'm being bossy, I'm being bitchy, but he's not. And there's so many examples of that. And for any of my employees that are watching this, you know, I don't feel this as much lately. And I only think it's because we've had growing pains over the years, and we've just learned how to hire better, and, you know, how to pick people better, and how to manage ourselves better. But this still happens, because I hear women business owners complain about it all the time, and I still see it. There are times when we'll interview somebody, and John will just get a little more deference sometimes because he's the male at the table, which really pisses me off. So, okay, end rant. What?
Well, so you asked before if you thought that generationally we felt like some of the newer generation felt like it wasn't as much an issue, and so I was kind of mulling that over, and I don't know that I think it's a generational thing. I think there are groups of people in every generation that take it seriously, and groups of people in every generation that don't. And obviously, I can't speak for the entire generation, but I have a 15-year-old daughter, and I would say she's very aware. And social media, for its pros and cons, has been part of that, right? I mean, it definitely is not always the best, because I think it perpetuates a lot of the stereotypes and the expectations, but it also does a lot to educate. And so I can have a philosophical conversation with her about what you were just speaking about, right? About saying the same thing at the table and the male being heard and the female not. And she doesn't bat an eye and seem like she's unaware of it. She's completely, and I think that that's the case. But there are definitely people that I've encountered when I go into companies at varying ages, some that will say, oh, you know, somebody will be saying, well, I just feel like I'm not being heard. Who will say, oh, you're just overreacting. So I think that it's more of just, there are groups of people, and a lot of that just has to do with their experiences, whether it's from role models that they encountered growing up or the toys that they were exposed to. Because certainly if all you ever did was let your child play with a blue-eyed blonde Barbie doll, then they are going to start to think that that's the expectation and what you're supposed to achieve. So I think it's having the diverse experience that helps people to be aware and realize that there is that the discrepancy in the way that people are treated.
Yeah, and I just think also, I mean, my daughter's 20, and she obviously was raised in a household with all of this. So, I mean, I just kind of ignore people when they, you know, roll their eyes at me or treat me like I'm, you know, they want to ignore me or brush me off to the side or whatever. I just kind of power through it, or I'm not afraid to speak my mind, you know, maybe to my own detriment at times. But, you know, I think she kind of tried to take the opposite approach with life generally, and tries to kind of get along with people. And so she's like, Mom, you know, you don't have to be so aggressive all the time with everything. Let me try it my way. And I do. And then she'll come to me with an issue, and she'll say, oh no, this was clearly because, you know, I'm a girl. And I'll say, okay, great. So now that you're coming to me, let's handle it this way. And
tried your way, now my way.
yeah. And I mean, I think one of the, look, it's great to have the role models, but the other part of this too is like I very affirmatively teach her or tell her or show her how to, I'll use the word manipulate. It's not always really a bad word, but it always comes across sounding like a bad word. But I always try and teach her how to manipulate the system to her advantage, right? So she's a woman. She's in an underrepresented, field of study as a woman. She wants to pursue an underrepresented career path as being a woman. And I'll say to her, just use the pussy power, because you can open so many doors by the fact that you are a woman, because when you go apply for a job, every other candidate is going to be a man. So you make the point that you're a woman because they're going to want to hire you because you're a woman. And I know that this concept is frowned upon, but the reality is that, we have a female vice president who is a multicultural woman of color who has created a future for so many girls in this country that it's just the ripple effects of what she will have done for young girls of color is just amazing. Like, you can't even speak into words what this woman is going to have done for future generations. It's really an amazing thing. So, and she pursued it aggressively, and no one will ever convince me otherwise, that she used exactly what she was and all of that in her arsenal to get to where she's at. And that's great. And I think that we need to explain to young girls that they should do that as well. And that being a woman shouldn't be a handicap, right? It shouldn't be like, oh, I have to apologize because I'm the woman at the table and I have to wait for my male counterpart to, re-speak into the universe what I'm saying, or I'm the bitch in the room because I'm the woman saying something as opposed to my male partner who's a counterpart, or, I'm going to observe that, women are just treated differently and not say anything about it. I mean, I'm always the one in the corner that, like, if somebody says something and it's either clearly racist or clearly discriminatory, like, I'm actually the one who's like shouting at people, strangers in stores, and
that doesn't shock me, Amy.
It's interesting because I'm listening to everything you're saying, and I almost take an opposite approach. I am very easygoing and I'm very soft-spoken, and I get what I want and I get things done in that way. Like, and my kids have called me. I have two daughters. They've both called me on many occasions and said, Mom, this isn't working. I can't get this done. Can you call this one and help me, whatever? And I will call, and I am strong about what I'm saying, but I don't go in guns blazing. And I just I kill them with kindness, I guess you could say. Mm-hmm. And I still get my way, just in a different way. And my kids will always say, like, they'll tell their friends, oh, you can't do it, my mom will do it. Like, it's a different way of going about it. But I get the same accomplishment.
But do you think that you have to do that because you're a woman?
Yes.
Okay. So a man could come in with guns blazing, but is anyone ever going to say, what a bitch?
They might. I don't know.
I'm always the bitch, though. That's the difference.
It's not my personality to come in guns blazing. It's not like I make a choice. It's just not my personality. But I was thinking of an example when you were talking about, Christina, with your partner. The one time that I didn't, and I had a plumber here. It's just a silly story. I had a plumber here, and I'm a widow. I live alone. My daughter's moved out, and he came in. I showed him whatever was wrong, and he said maybe 3 or 4 times in the 5 minutes he was here, has your husband looked at this? Has your husband tried to fix this? And I'm just standing there like this. And I had 2 thoughts in my head. I'm like, either he wants to know if I have a husband because he's going to come back and kill me, or he's just a misogynist asshole.
Ori wants to ask you on a date.
So I didn't say anything. And when he left, I was so angry with myself that I didn't say anything. That I should have been like, no, you fucking asshole. I live by myself. And I looked at it. Like, that was the one time I was so angry with myself that I didn't like take a stand with a man like that.
Yeah. Well, see, this is what we're talking about. I think Rosie, you mentioned this about microaggressions.
Yep.
Is
Absolutely.
it's not overt anymore. And I think that they even said that at some point in the Barbie movie. They were like, oh yeah, we can't really say that anymore. So we do it in other ways.
Right.
You remember that part?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think there's two different approaches to, and there's some things that are just personality wise, right?
Yeah.
I have personally learned sometimes that there are just certain battles that you fight and others that you do not. And I'm also more the kill them with kindness approach. And I just try to fight the battles I think are important and let go of everything else and try to get out of my own way and just gauge the audience. Some people do fine with aggressive, straightforward, and some people do not. So you got to really have to gauge who the audience is or who you're speaking at in any given time. And that's just something that you acquire as you grow and take more leadership roles. And just there's something about your innate personality and knowing there are people who are natural born leaders, but most of us are learned leaders too, right? We read and we apply certain techniques, and as we go in life we grow and we realize that. And I think a lot of it is, what's your message, what do you want to accomplish, and who you're sending the message to. But one of the things I wanted to say about Vice President Harris, I feel that I agree and disagree, because I think she's the least visible vice president we've had in a long time. And that's really unfortunate, right? It's almost like we elected this woman as a vice president and she's kept it somewhere. Like, I don't know what she's doing, what she does, or where she's been. And it's extremely rare that you see her out in public or doing public speeches. So I would love to see more of that. And, and
They
it's
put her back in her box.
yeah, they put her back in her box. Like, great, we put you on this ballot. We got all these people to vote for you. And now, like, I don't know where she is. Maybe next year, if they start campaigning, she'll show up somewhere. But it's literally the greatest missed opportunity for women. Because
she was out a lot more in the beginning, and then she's sort of been in the background the last, I would say, year. But yeah, it's funny because I actually see a bunch of what she's doing because I follow her on social media. So I do see like her doing stuff, but it's not as much as
But that's kind of like that bias. Like, if we love her and we're following her, right, then we can see it. But for the general public and the general news, it's not there. Like the 6 o'clock news, we don't hear about it that much, right? It's like they're not really trying to promote that. And I mean, I live in rural North Carolina, and one of my male friends, I don't know, we were talking about dating and stuff, and he's like, well, you're not going to have anybody date you if you have that Kamala Harris picture in your background, and on Facebook. And I just laughed, and I'm like, well, if somebody's bothered with that, I probably don't want to date him. And the pool is very small, and everybody, but it's just very interesting how that works out. So I'm kind of glad that you brought that up. I really do think it probably, people looked at her and was like, wow, like, look at that, the first female vice president, and she's also like ethnic and has a blended family and has always been a working woman. And I think it's fantastic, but I do wish that we would put her a little bit more on the forefront.
And she's childless.
Yes.
She's like,
automatically means that she is less relevant.
Probably, yes. According to society, for sure. Right?
Yeah.
What's your rule? Get married and have kids.
Let me ask you guys, what do you think? Do you see anything now with your daughters or with other young females that you have in your lives? Do you see anything that's different for them than it was for you when you were growing up?
I don't have daughters, so I can't mention that. I have a lot of like girls that are daughters, my friends. I do think that the main thing that they see, and this is just, I guess, my group of friends, is that they're mostly all working women, and there are some stay-at-home dads. And just like for my sons, it's probably a role reversal that not a lot of their friends have because, their dad is a stay-at-home dad and they have always had a working mom. So I think it's not just girls, but we really have to educate boys. If the boys see working women and mothers who are working women, they will absolutely fall with that. But also, what I worry is about them seeing moms doing not just the work outside of the home, but the work inside of the home, and that not being a shared equal field yet. I think majority of working women still carry a lot of the household weight. It's not that common to see men carry more of that. So I do love seeing some of my friends and even in my family where the men do take, and carry on some of the household chores. And I think relationships are more successful when it's a little bit more even. But I don't have daughters, so I'll let all of you guys who have daughters speak to that.
You're training the young men.
I'm trying to, yes.
So thank you for that. Thank you for your service.
So when you were asking that question, are you asking specifically about messages around gender roles or self-image? I was curious what angle you're taking.
Any of it.
Okay.
Can you say that young girls, young women's experience in the world is better / easier / different? I mean, there might be some things that are harder. I don't know. But what have you observed about that? Like, is different within their experience than what you had?
Yeah, definitely different. I think some better and some worse, because I do think, to the point that was earlier made, there is more conversation than there used to be around gender roles and gender identity and understanding. And so there's more freedom to discuss it, where I think in the past, if you ask some of those questions, even for me when I was a kid, I think it was still almost like, why are you questioning the status quo? So there's definitely more freedom of that type of conversation. But I think, and I'm sure we would all agree, this social media has just made everything extremely more difficult from being under a magnifying glass all the time. You can't make a mistake without it living on in eternity if somebody caught it on video. There's a lot of pressure because, you had friends that would hang out with each other without you, and that just happened. Friends hang out by themselves, but now you're seeing them sharing pictures of it, so you're feeling left out.
Yeah.
There's a lot of the need to make sure you've got the latest trend, right? Sometimes it took a while for trends to trickle down. Now it's, if a new sneaker comes out, you're finding out about it the next day, and there's the immediate pressure. So that pressure cooker, for me, I cannot even imagine. I mean, I think adolescence was so hard, but with that constantly in your pocket and in your ear all the time, just magnifies everything.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I have a hard time with it, and I'm 48. So,
Right.
everybody's life looks perfect on Instagram. Everybody's got perfect skin. Their neck looks perfect, Rosie. So I'll be coming down there soon to get my neck fixed. I mean, I think it's natural to compare yourself to others, but now you have this huge platform of internet and social media to compare yourself, not just with the kids at school or whoever is at work, but now you're doing with everybody on the internet. And you've got filters and does anybody find it completely ridiculous that Madonna is 65 years old and she's always filtered on her Instagram page? She has no wrinkles. Like, it's not her. She doesn't look like that. But somehow these images are always being portrayed that, this is how she is. So I find that damaging. So I will say that I've always thought that young girls had it easier, but now that we're talking about this, I can see some ways where they actually don't have it easier. And I think that's more of a detriment. And we didn't have that when we were kids.
The social media definitely makes life so much harder for them. My kids are a little bit older; they're 22 and 24, so it hit them as they were getting older. But the younger girls now, they're born. It's all they know is this filters, and everybody, like you said, somebody misses a party, it's like the worst thing in the world. You see it all over the place. It's I think a really hard time to grow up.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we're probably all about the same age. So I think when we were all growing up, we just didn't have as much You know, so we had like our immediate peer group that we saw what was going on. And we saw what was on TV, which, you know, back in the days when we all had a clicker and there were only 4 channels. Well, like, we all age ourselves when we talk about clickers, by the way.
I remember the clicker.
But, you know, like, we didn't have that. Now my daughter's 20, so she had like the tail end of social media. She's got a good head on her shoulders with things. But my little guy, he's 9, and like he'll show me stuff. Like he loves, you know, all the little kids, like they love YouTube, and I'm sure you go through this with Sydney. Like they watch all these videos, and they all want to be YouTubers, and they're like watching. You know, these like other kids, like, you know, they put together these fake videos of things that they do in the world, or there's families that put together these like fake, you know, they're staged videos of real things that they're doing. And then he wants to like reproduce this stuff. And I'm like, it's not real. And he's like, but I watched the video. Like, it's hard for them to understand the difference between what's real and what isn't. And so we've just kind of gotten to the point where we take the hard line of everything on YouTube is bullshit. And we just tell him that because it's easier to say it's all fake than to try and differentiate between what's real and what isn't. And if it is something that's like real, like, I don't know, people were dropping eggs off of their houses during the pandemic. So like we did this, you know, like you build some kind of a box and then you drop the egg off. I don't know. Am I the only one that did this with their child? Now I'm starting to feel like like weird Barbie. You know, you build like a crate of something, and then you put the egg in it, and then you throw it off the house to see if the egg would break. Like if it's something that is realistic, like I'll do it with him. Like I bought googly eyes, so now we run around with googly eyes on things. You know, fun or silly things, but just to show him the difference between like what's real and what you can do that you see on social media, and that everything else is really just bullshit, because otherwise they are going to think that it's, you know, it's real or it's something that can be recreated. Madonna is a weird, I want to say she's like a weird aberration, but we have a plastic surgeon here who will probably tell me otherwise. Like, I don't know. I personally, like, I'm kind of, I don't know, I found like the whole plastic surgery thing to be a little weird. Like, I don't want to manipulate my body to that extent. I have had some procedures, but they were more like related to the fact that I had like extra skin on my body from having the baby that was like causing me physical distress. So I had a tummy tuck after my son because I had like a lot of extra skin. But I mean, I don't know that I could, like, Madonna's had all this plastic surgery to make herself look younger. And she's talked about it publicly to say, like, you know, I don't hear anybody, you know, criticizing men who are 70 years old that have done the same thing to make themselves look younger. So, I mean, Madonna's like, you know, whatever, the great feminist putting herself out there to, you know, fall on the sword, humping wedding gowns on stage to free all of us in this great revolution, whatever, 1984. But, you know, is that also like where we're at? Like, is that part of, you know, giving women equality, that, you know, we can be as vain as men?
Well, I think it's not equality because men are allowed to age.
Yeah.
That is really still the concept. I mean, if you look at Kenny Rogers, he was highly criticized for actually having had a facelift and not looking like Kenny Rogers. And there's not that many men having a significant amount of procedures. You can see news anchors with major bags underneath their eyes, right? And you can never see a Katie Couric not looking perfect on TV. Mm-hmm. So I think there's still major double standards about who's allowed to age and who's not allowed to age. And one of the things I tell people is that, you know, I guess we harbored on Madonna, but Madonna and any of the other celebrities like Ashley Judge that people have, sorry, I got to silence some of these texts coming through, have criticized a lot. They don't ask to look weird. right? They don't, you would imagine with as much money as they have, they don't have bad plastic surgeons or, people who are trying to do a bad job. But what happens is if you do a lot at the same time and you become somebody who pushes to have a lot of procedures done at the same time, you're going to have some blockage of your lymphatics, and you're going to have some swelling that stays to your face. Like, all of us are humans and have the same framework to begin with. That's why all of them end up kind of looking alike and like this Catwoman effect. I don't think they're looking for the aesthetics. I don't think anybody walks into my office and says, "Can you please make me look like Catwoman?" Like, everybody just wants to look natural. So I tell them, well, natural is who you are right now. So, well, I'm 70, I don't want to look 20. And I'm like, well, that's great, because that is impossible, right? So it's also about like setting expectations and understanding what people want, and trying to bring them back to reality. I had someone the other day who said, I want to sit down, I'll have rolls in my belly. And I said, well, that just doesn't happen. Like, every single person sits down and has rolls in their belly, right? And some people focus on the extra skin in their belly. Some people focus on their small breasts or their large breasts. And, it's like, I make them smaller and I make them bigger in the same day. Like, everybody wants to be a C, whatever that is. Like, I've never had anyone walk in, like 98% of people walking in, whether they want bigger breasts or smaller breasts, say they want to be a C. But they don't even really know what a C is. Like, they have no idea how brows are measured, what sister sizes are, right? And when they look at for some of them, it's their face. And there are some 20-year-olds that want Botox because they want to prevent getting old. And there are some 70-year-olds that think that they can have Botox and look 50, when really at that point they need a facelift, right? So it's all about just different expectations of what they see around themselves and of themselves, and about making them feel better. So as long as you can deliver somebody some kind of empowering tool, whether there is education or a little bit of dabbing into Botox today, right? Or what they wear, or the shoes that they put on their feet, right? The purse that they carry. Everybody has different things that make them feel more confident about the way that they can feel the universe. But unfortunately, in my job, it's mostly how they look. And it's a catch-22, because you can be the person that wants to do it safely and and realistically, or you can be somebody that really is just looking to make money off of people's insecurities. And there's a lot of them out there, unfortunately, that will try to push people to do things that are not necessary and won't necessarily make them feel or look better. So there is still some people in this environment of aesthetics that they will say they're trying to empower women, but in the end, they're really not. They're just empowering their wallets, and that's the really sad aspect of it.
Well, it's interesting that some people will still rather choose looking weird over looking old. I mean, we could have a whole other show about aging. And I think Robin, Ross, and I even have done that about women and aging. But it's just interesting. And somebody said earlier, but Princess Leia, Carrie, I forget her last name, she said at some point, she said, I'm sorry that I got old, because people would see her and be like, what happened to you? And like, when was Star Wars? I mean, that was a long time ago. She got older. She didn't look the same way. She didn't look, as good, she didn't look young, like a young woman anymore. And she said, I'm sorry I got old. But we are at the top of the hour, and I want to make sure that I keep my promise that we were only going to do this for an hour. I appreciate your time, as always, and would love to have anybody back again. You always have a VIP pass with me if you ever want to do another show. And for people that are watching or listening now, you can catch the replay here on Facebook. This stays on forever. And you can listen to it on Wake Up Call, the podcast. We'll see you next time. And thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.